Um, Let me first of all appreciate that today's subject is uniquely important to the nation of Kenya. It's uniquely important to the people of Kenya, to the society of this great nation. I will also begin by first of all appreciating that we have quite good mix today. And this good mix today, perhaps I will also be beginning by asking a question which will be in form of a challenge. But apart from the lack of the private sector, when I was talking with Makolo at the table there, I noted that we have all various aspects of sectors in this country. We have the lands, we have water, we have agriculture, we have everybody. We have even the police, we have the judiciary, the state law, the civil society, we have the media, but we don't have the private sector. Perhaps it's a blessing in disguise. Who is the larger beneficiary of forests? That's for our own consumption a little bit later on. But I also recognize that we have the indigenous people, although again, there is a challenge in terms of the definition of who is indigenous and who is not indigenous. But of course, we have our constitution that is guiding us into these definitions. Let's also appreciate that we have a major challenge in our country, and that is, as we know, that any nation depends on natural resources for its socio-economic development. And for us in Kenya, we know that we have not come to the level of 10% forest cover, which is internationally recognized as the level that a country can be considered to be environmentally stable. And therefore, that's a major challenge that we have. And so when we look at this subject of forest law enforcement, compliance, and governance, you will agree with me that this is a major subject that we have before us. Fortunately enough, and this is the challenge I can also give to you today, is that as we have a low forest cover in this country of less than 2%, the figure that's been quoted over the years, and we are aspiring to go to 10%, that's a difference of 8%. What does that translate into in this nation? That translates to about 8% of the land in the country. And in terms of area coverage, what is it? It amounts to, if you do your mathematics right, it amounts to 50,000 square kilometers. You can imagine that amount of land that we have to put under forest so that our country can be sustainable in terms of the environment aspects. And so who is going to do this? Is it somebody else out of mass? Why has our forest cover reduced? Colonial times, our forest cover was more than 12%, and now we are talking about 2%. Who has been the culprit? Let us not do a blame game here. It is both you and I. Whether you have contributed to that in monetary terms, whether you have benefited or you have not benefited, but you have also contributed in the lack of action. If you did not do what you are called upon, what you are able to do, by not engaging, then you also contributed to the degradation of forest cover in this country. I'm happy when I hear Makolo starting off his remarks in a religious note. That's very encouraging because I'm a Christian too. And I confess the Christian faith. let us be serious. Let's look at the genesis of forest, or rather not forest laws, but laws in humanity. Laws started, if you believe in creation, like I believe most of us do, the first laws were given to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Given the dominion of all the resources in the Garden of Eden and told to enjoy, they were given the liberty to enjoy the resources in that garden, paradise. And so they were given the do's and don'ts. Those are the laws that were started then. And as these laws evolved to the times of Moses, and of course you know the Ten Commandments, but also, the laws also come and also free access to the resources that we have to utilize do come with a responsibility, which was quoted here, and that responsibility comes with a cost. Who bears that cost? How do we finance that cost? So it's a challenge that we have to live with. So if I ask you again, why do we have a low forest cover? Why do we continue to see degradation in this country? Again, we repeat, we are not going to have a blame game here, because this is the time that we have to have collective responsibility, and that's why we have acknowledged that the representation here is wholesome, apart from that segment I pointed out. And if we look at what the challenges we have today, we see that even as we say the genesis of the laws that were given by God that time, they were floated. And non-compliance comes with punishment. Compliance comes with reward. And so we can authoritatively say that flouting of laws did not start yesterday. They started long time ago. But that's not what should justify us to continue on the same. The biggest challenge that we have had in the forest sector now, as in the country, is in terms of not the lack of laws, but the lack of implementation, the lack of enforcement. So our challenge for this fora is to come up with realistic ways of how do we address this situation, avoid complaining like it has been in the past many times, and to come up with clear actions that we can, all of us, own up to, and seek best ways and best practices that we can address forest law enforcement and governance. We are lucky as a country today that we have a new constitution, which I like to say it's no longer new now, it's exactly the constitution, which brings about a paradigm shift in the way our resources are governed, in the way the human being is to be governed in this country. So I want to repeat the ingredients of the Constitution, because I believe we are all aware about the values which are inculcated in the Constitution, the major aspects in terms of rights, the biggest chapter, and also the issue of participation, because you're not going to move anywhere now without participation. And it's not just participation by the sake of saying you have called a meeting and all this. It is value of participation. It's actual participation that has to take place. And our Constitution brings in integration and cohesion, and a major aspect is the devolution. So in terms of our forest law enforcement and compliance, how are we going to tackle the case for devolution in respect to our forest resources? We are happy that there is already a task force going around the country in terms of establishing structures of county governments. A report has already been prepared, and out of that report, we are going to contribute, all of us. This is the time to talk to each other as to how we expect the national linkages, national government linkage to county government, and also how the services, in this case, if you like, the Kenya Forest Service, the Kenya Wildlife Service, and a research body that implement forest sector development, sustainable development of our country. So, and we don't have a lot of time. We have to move in great speed, because one of the things that had made us not move much forward is actually getting the communities to participate and also to play a big role in resource management. What you have here behind us in terms of sustainable development. And so we also need to look at areas that have been perhaps not well addressed. When we talk about law enforcement and governance, what's the ownership of this law or laws? Who owns these laws? Are we making these laws for the sake of it? And so we find, and I've come to realize that unless we make everyone appreciate that the laws are not made for someone else out there to implement them, the laws are made for the society, for the people, for the nation, community, and for the implementation focus perspective, the institutions that have the direct mandate. It's not just for the institution itself to have those laws, but the institution is to drive those laws with the people. So when I look at Kimani over there, I can, if you can salute again, as the commandant in the Kenya Forest Service, we are now challenged that our laws should be dynamic so that we change with emerging issues to become current in the way we manage our resources. And therefore, we do have to recognize that the forest laws that we have had in the past, and even as we now revise them, they're meant for the public good. Have we been able to live to that aspiration? We have failed miserably, but this is the time now we should be able to correct this shortcoming. And another thing that we need to look at carefully and deeply is the issue of interpretation of this law, because, as it has been said, you have differentiated interpretation of laws. I may interpret the same law in a different perspective, and another one will interpret it in a different perspective. And that in itself creates some certain conflict in terms of law implementation and enforcement. We also need to look at why do we need these laws. Is it for the sake of having the laws to be so much legalistic? That's not the intention. Why we need the laws, one of the things that we have to realize is to provide a legal framework for managing our resources better. Because you cannot manage your resources with confusion. There has to be order, and because we know resources are limited, and we've got to organize ourselves in a way that we cross-share the resources. And so as we pursue a legal framework, we expect that we should find opportunities in protecting our resources, in this case the forests, and also to create wealth. Laws are not meant to suppress creation of wealth. We should find the opportunity that we should be able to find creation of wealth. So let us not be blaming and be complaining that we don't have jobs in the country, because we know there are opportunities in investments in the forest sector, and we have to apply our laws properly so that we can have a conducive environment for promoting investments in the forest sector in our country. So we're not just having laws for the sake of it. We are having to do laws so that at the end of the day we are able to support sustainable development in this country. Again, we need to look at the other issues that will help us to enhance law enforcement, and so definitions become quite important. We need to look at the broad perspectives of the sector, and also therefore of the laws that we have to apply, and also to appreciate that governance is much broad, is not just looking at one institution alone, but it's across the board in a country. The issue of incentives is very important, because again, we are not having laws for the sake of having laws. As I have said, there are various reasons. We want to promote investments, and we cannot have laws that cause a lot of disincentives, because then you are not going to move the sector appropriately in terms of sustainability in the long term. And for us to move forward, we need to look at the institutional framework, because as I said, there is the directly mandated institution. In this regard, we are looking at the Ministry of Forestry and Wildlife, and much more the technical arm, the Kenya Forest Service. But we have to work with various institutions at the local level, regional level, and as the representation from the Embassy of Finland talked about, the regionality and also international perspectives. So we have to look at all these issues. And so the challenge in terms of capacity building in enforcing the laws, in implementing, which also brings me to think about the skills that we need. We need skills so that we are able to translate our laws and the implementation in the manner that is best for the nation. I won't repeat the case for participation. I have mentioned it. And as is happening in the police service, that the issue of community policing was resisted initially, but now people have realized that this is a reality and this is the way to go. So we also need to see in the forest law enforcement that we are promoting participation. Quite importantly, we need to look at benefit sharing, because we are enforcing our laws to promote our resources management, and we expect some benefits in better conserved forest, in better managed resources. And without repeating a lot, the case of multiplicity of players, actors, is a major challenge. And harmonized policies and laws, we find that this has made us not progress as much as we would have wanted. But this is the time that we are now harmonizing our laws. We are revising the forest policy. It's already in draft. We shall be sharing that with you. We are also amending the Forest Act. And as we do this, we want your participation. All the sectors, we would like the participation of all the sectors so that at least we come up with more comprehensive and laws that, as I said, we are writing the laws for the ownership of the society of this country. Now, as we implement, or rather draw these laws, and as I said, they also come at a cost. We also need to be looking at, in terms of financing, how are we going to be able to sustain the institutional framework for implementation of the laws that we are going to undertake. And in this respect, we now need to look at, we have to go beyond the government financing and look at the case for alternative financing, for example, the carbon financing. Luckily for us in the forest sector, we have prepared the RED, I am sure you know, reducing emissions through deforestation and degradation. This is the instrument that we are applying to address climate change. Because in terms of our governance issues, and we have talked about the challenges that we have in the forest sector, climate change is here with us. A major mitigating and adaptation perspective on climate change, the sector plays a major contribution. And for us to come up with this, we had to look at participation, and that has been achieved. So we are now in the process of implementation, which will also be supporting the issues of forest law enforcement and governance. Now, we cannot have law enforcement without looking at technology. If you're using old equipment like the 303s, I'm sure most of you will know what type of a gun that one is, and a thief is using an AK-47, you see that you need to move with the times. And so the application of technology is quite crucial. The issue of information communication technology, we are today in the e-government management, and we have to move with time so that in law enforcement, we can also apply technology, modern technology, to be able to move ahead. We also need to apply research so that we can identify with information, generate information. We have also to put in place better cultural practices and also identify with indigenous knowledge. And so maybe in closing is to remind ourselves that we have to have all stakeholders cooperating with us, both within the country, communities, the regional perspective, East African community. This year is the International Year of Forests, and we launched it sometime in March. And the reason for the International Year of Forests came about because it was recognized that there was not enough or adequate awareness globally to appreciate the role of forest in humanity. And so, for the first time, this year was declared International Year of Forest. We commemorated it. We launched it by commemorating the Day of Forest, which is in March. So we combined the two. And it's for you and me, we are all called upon to ensure that we create more awareness so that all people become conversant with the roles that they need to play to ensure that we enforce forest laws in this country for the better management of our resources, for development, social economic development of this nation. And therefore, as I close, I would like to appreciate the support that we have received from the government of Finland in coming up to support us in forest sector reforms, because we have a major challenge to turn around forestry development in this country for the better of this nation. With those few remarks, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to officially declare this workshop open, not necessarily with a key, but by saying the best may come to us. Thank you so much.